All right, Facebook. It's been a while since I've done one of these lives. Actually, it's only been a couple of minutes, but apparently my audio wasn't working, so I'm back on doing it with audio because I'm sure you guys like to look at me and watch my head bobble around, but without audio, there's probably not a lot that I have to offer the world. Just ask my fiance; she'll tell you that sometimes she wishes she could turn the audio off. Right? Anyways, um, look, here's the deal. Some of you may know I've been sick the last 3 weeks or so, and not like deathbed sick, but sick enough to where it's caused some real chaos and things that I got to sort out, such as being sick would cause. Um, but today I feel like a full human again, which is awesome. I still got a little bit of sinusy stuff, but it's all very very manageable now. Energy's back, all that kind of good stuff. So here's why I wanted to go live is that for the last few weeks I've had a lot of time to like contemplate some real life things. I can tell you the last year of my life, it really I got blindsided by a couple of things, and I really kind of stumbled enough there that it's not been great for me to regain my full composure within myself. Like I don't think outwardly, and I don't think like business has been affected so much by it and different things, but for me, like who I am has been affected, and it's caused me to go on a bit of a journey to sort out some things, and that's kind of why I titled this, "Darkness in the End of the Road." It's a pretty dramatic title, right? Like it's a little bit over the top, but there's a reason that I titled it that, and it has to do with me reminding myself of some truths that I've kind of all but forgotten, right? Like, I know this stuff, I teach this stuff. You put me on stage and let me talk about the stuff that I talk about, you will leave with a different perspective and you'll go, holy crap, that guy must really have it together. But here's the truth. You can know the truth about principles, but if you don't always apply them, or you forget to apply them, or you fall out of habit with them, like you suffer the same effects. Like knowledge is not power in this case. Habit is power, right? And I fell out of habit with some of the things that I know to be true. And so I thought I'd go live here and just kind of go over what I'm reminding myself about, because maybe it'll help you, but also talk about these concepts in a little more detail. Because I think as we all start a new year, and I know I'm a good 3 weeks late on the whole we're on to a new year, let's talk about our goals kind of thing, right? But as we all embark on a new year, right, we're 14 days in, there's a lot of opportunity ahead of us. And that opportunity is only going to be realized to the extent that we can allow ourselves to engage with it, right? And everybody has different levels of we call it problems sometimes, but it's really just different levels of things to navigate, right? Problems aren't really problems. I mean, if you guys want to talk about a problem, right, and we'll go into this a little bit, um, people that lived in the Pacific Palisades last week just had normal everyday problems. Today, they're figuring out their entire life situation, right? They're looking at what they have for real in life and going, oh, dang, this is a different situation. And people have all sorts of different dynamics around that. It's horrible, it's tragic, it's all of those things that we would associate as a bad situation. Um, most of us, fortunately, and not to diminish the people that have gone through this tragedy, but like most of us, if you're watching this today, like you're probably not dealing with problems as severe as that. And then you can take it to another degree and go into a third world country, or somebody who's dealing with severe mental illness, or something that's not just a hiccup in life that a few years from now they'll look back and go, oh yeah, that was a crazy time. These are things that are systemic through their entire life, right? My friend Tim talks about this all the time. Like, imagine if you lived in a place where it was a 7 mile walk to get water, and you knew you had to get water for your family to survive, but you were going to be likely beaten, robbed, and raped every time you go to make that journey, and you still got to come home with the water. It's a different life, right? Like those are things that fortunately most of us, I know there's some situations, but fortunately most of us don't have to deal with that here in the U.S. and any sort of civilized part of the world. So when we talk about problems, right, there's degrees of problems. Like getting sick is not a problem, although it creates things for me to deal with, right? There's things to navigate because of it. Um, so I don't want to put weight on these and have a competition on who has bigger problems, because I think that's actually one of the things that works against us. But it did remind me of something, and I think it's true universally. And it's this idea that life happens for us and not to us. And when we look at things that are problematic, it's really hard sometimes for us to hold that perspective. Like, how could this be happening for me? And I'll tell you only from my experience, right, of just recently being sick. I know for a fact that the way that I dealt with some things over the last year has compounded a health problem, or an emerging health problem. It's very manageable. It's not, I'm not like on a deathbed or anything, but an emerging health problem that's affecting me, right? It's a blood sugar kind of situation. And that's affected my energy, my ability to engage with things, my ability to manage stress, all of these things. And it's caused some things that I really wanted to plane up to either not really take off, or some of it to even trend the other way. And getting sick after a year of habits that support not getting healthier, right? I wasn't constantly in a state of not getting healthier, but it's a different thing when your body starts to shift, right? Like, it's not like the things I've always done for health are going to work when this thing emerges. I got to change some different habits, right? This being sick allowed me to realize that if I don't change those habits, things are going to get significantly worse. Well, that's a gift, right? That's life happening for me, not to me, right? I could say, oh, I got sick and I still got to do all these things, which is certainly something that, I wrestle with, and I think anybody would. But there's also this perspective of like, hey, maybe, just maybe, there's a different reason for this. And when you start to pay attention, the signs are everywhere, right? It's kind of crazy to me. Like, my relationship with God has always been something I've kept more private. I've talked about it in different ways, not from a traditional religious sense or anything like that. And I very intentionally don't talk about it from those ways, because some people are triggered by it, and my ability to influence in that, if I don't use that language, a lot of times it's better for people to help come to their own conclusions, right? Particularly when I'm teaching these concepts. But it's a funny thing, because if you go look, and you really go look, like, God's always there, and there's always a message for you to grab, and there's always a place for you to glean insight. And it stems from this idea that life happens for us and not to us. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Whatever you got going on, whether it's something as tragic as the fires in LA, or, the hurricane victims from, hurricane season, or even if you're in another country and there's, more terrible things that nobody would want to experience, the life happening for us, not to us, is a really important concept to remember, because the most challenging things, I remember I was listening to Jordan Peterson talk with, I think it was Sean Ryan, and he was explaining, he was asking Sean Ryan, like, what made you go to Navy SEAL training, right? Like, what made you go to BUDS? And he's like, well, it was like the hardest thing that I could imagine doing at the time. And Jordan Peterson said something that was really powerful. I'm sure I'm paraphrasing it here, but he said, of course it was the hardest thing, and of course it was the most rewarding, because it takes the hardest thing to pull out of us the greatest thing, right? Our greatness is completely contingent on our ability to deal with what we would consider to be hard. Once we champion that, it's not hard anymore, right? It's just something that we do. But life calls on us sometimes to be great in moments where we don't feel great. And that's something to navigate, right? And that's life happening for us, not to us, right? There's some other ways to say it that they're kind of inspiration-y, and I don't always like those things, because they can kind of patch a hole for a moment, and it's really hard for people to just like inherently have faith in. But one of them is that, life might be difficult because it's preparing you for what you actually asked for, right? It's preparing you for who you're supposed to be. I don't know that that's necessarily true, But I can tell you that life does happen for you and not to you. The bad things that you run into are there to serve you. And you may not know how, and it might be a lesson for you to sort out. But once you get it, you'll realize the service that it is. And I can prove it to you because I guarantee everybody that's watching this far and paying any attention is had situations in their life that have been, what most people would call negative, and they can look back on them and go, thank God that happened. Otherwise, I might have ended up someplace even worse, right? Thank God the bad thing happened because it's the reason that the good things exist now. That's life happening for you, not to you, right? So I think it's a really important concept. And I think when you start to take challenges and look at them that way and you start to look around, you'll notice there's little messages that pop up. For me, all sorts of little messages around my health. And, I have a health and wellness company that we're working on launching. And this is something that's, I have pretty intimate knowledge about. Like, I understand these things for sure, but my practice wasn't keeping up with the understanding. Well, guess what? Like, you're going to run a health and wellness company while you're not managing your health. Like, one, that's a problem, right? So got to fix that. But two, like, poof, here's all the resources you've ever needed to figure this out, right? We've got this really cool blood test, and I've got, one of the best doctors on the planet that's behind all of the research and all the things that we're doing. And it's like, hey, dummy, like, you have all this stuff right here. Quit freaking looking the other way and, like, take this seriously and start making some changes in your habits. Then you won't have to get sick for 3 weeks, right? That's a service. That's a life happening for me, not to me. Now, it also allowed me to reevaluate a lot of things that I have going on professionally, and in life in general. And part of that evaluation, not that my personal relationship with Meg has ever been bad or negative, but it caused me to see a couple of things that we could improve on, and that that I could improve on, right? And so that opened up some conversations that really is started enriching that relationship even more, which is great, right? Life happening for me, not to me, right? It's revealing information that allows me to take specific action. I have more opportunity in front of me from a business standpoint than most anybody will have in their lifetime. And I don't mean that to be a flex by any means. It's actually been quite a curse in certain ways. And I've created that situation out of a few different, beliefs and patterns and ways that I interact. It's very good in many senses, but it's been very challenging in other senses, and it's caused me to evaluate, like, what those opportunities actually mean. I have a really hard time saying no to people because my core purpose has always been to just serve who's in front of me. What happens when a number of people come to me with a number of opportunities and I go, yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll go crush it, right? Me reaching the end of my ability to manage that stress load and all of those activities and then health declining, it's like, well, no, that's not a promise I can make anybody. So, like, that's life happening for me, not to me, to create boundaries and guardrails to show me that there's a place that there is a boundary to this. And if I cross that boundary, things get negative because you can't possibly manage all of those things. Now, I have a different belief that says we're more powerful than we could possibly imagine. So, like, bring it on, right? Like, it's this superhuman kind of mentality. I'm proud of that. I've been able to accomplish a lot because of it. I've been able to handle more than most people because of it. But there's a point where I realized it relies on some other systems. It relies on some other things for that to be true in any way. And that's caused me to consider, do I even want that to be true? Because, like, it's a little cheesy, right? You go back to Spider-Man, like, with great power comes great responsibility. It's kind of true, right? If you're capable of doing a lot of great things and you mismanage that responsibility, you actually risk creating more problems than you do solutions. And that's never been my goal. That's never been what I wanted. That's what I've buried the stress or burdened the stress, handled the stress to avoid, right? Well, the body went, you've wired yourself for stress so much for so long. And even though you've tried to counter that from time to time, you keep going back to being wired for stress. Well, that's not so good for the immune system or nervous system to be in that situation for extended periods of time. So cool, I got to fix that now. That's just the game, and that also means I have to look at how I evaluate these other opportunities. And here's the deal. You guys all have the same stuff that I have going on, right? You have opportunities in front of you. You have things you're considering. You have life goals that you're working on. You have relationships. You have all of these things, and they're all happening for you in different ways at different times. And the things to navigate, or what I'm kind of reframing challenges to or problems, right, is just things to navigate. The thing is to navigate change as you progress through those. And that's kind of the point, right? Like that's the journey of life. And when I titled this like darkness in the end of the road, there's a real power to understanding the darker elements of life. Because let's face it, like happiness is great. It's wonderful. Everybody loves to be happy. There's a couple of problems with it, right? Like it's like life isn't all happiness. You know, we can say, well, life is what you make it. Sure. And we can make it happiness. Sure. But what is that, right? Like what is that as we navigate these different things? And I want to give you a different perspective. And the reason I kind of use darkness as the contrast is not to glorify the negative parts of life, but to understand there's a couple of different ways to look at life. And if we look at it for just what it is, this idea that life is happening for us, not to us, you end up getting real neutral about the good or the bad, right? You get rid of the polarity, and it's not that happiness becomes a problem, but it sort of doesn't matter. And because it doesn't matter, then you can actually be something like happy, right? When it matters, when we're striving for it, when we're trying to get it, it's constantly something that's not in our purview, right? Some of my favorite books are the Conversations with God books. And in the first book, he talks about this idea of, I think it's substitute is what he called it. But it's this idea of you can't have what you want, right? The very act of wanting it says that you don't have it. Therefore, you are without it. Therefore, you're in a state of chasing or wanting. And the state of wanting is a very different place than having. Well, how do you get to a place of having? It's about becoming neutral about these things. It's about the things that we call dark, or the things that are negative in life. It's about those being okay as part of our story in life. It's about those things being okay to happen. Not that we want them or desire them, or that we put them on any pedestal. In fact, it's the opposite. It's like we take everything off a pedestal, and then we're just here to live, right? These kind of ideas of good, bad, right, wrong, positive, negative, they inspire competition in life, which is a wanting to win in a certain way. And we all love to win. Like it's a very great thing. It's not always the best thing for us, because we often realize when we win something, we won something smaller than what we expected it to be. Life is more than all of this. And I can promise you right now, the people that are dealing with stuff out in LA, and the people that dealt with things with the hurricane, right? Like they are for sure looking at life through a different lens. Like what really mattered? Like what was winning if, man, like last week, life was just normal life and we were moving on. And today, multi-million-dollar mansions are gone. They have no insurance, and they're looking at the people around them going, the only thing we have left is the community. Oh, wow. There's something more to this whole life thing than just whatever games we played. But the games are fun. Like I'm not diminishing the games. I'm not diminishing the goals and the wins and all of those things. It's just when you can properly understand life happens for us, not to us, you realize that those things are just some part of the game and not the actual life, right? And there's, I'm not saying there's no emotions around that. I'm not saying that people should act in any particular way around it. I'm just simply bringing up the idea that like negative experiences are part of life, and it's okay for darkness to exist as long as we're not clinging to it, as long as we're not in it in some form of avoidance or whatnot. We just navigate through it. We all do it every day. Every day, all of us have challenges that are bigger and crazier than what any of our ancestors had. And we kind of think it's the opposite, right? But like, there's more happening today and more for your brain to have to account for than there ever was 200 years ago, right? And time moves faster than ever before. You're on social media, you got 15 different ways to communicate with somebody. You're driving through different traffic conditions. Sometimes it's snowing, sometimes it's raining. You got to get on a flight and you're on this clock and time schedule. And family dynamics are happening, political dynamics are happening, business dynamics are happening, health dynamics are happening, like all of these things. And we tend to look back on those other times and we go, man, it must have been hard to live back then. And, I'm not saying that it didn't have struggles, right? Like you can definitely point to things like diseases and, the Wild West was crazy, right? Like you could get killed at any time. There's definitely some challenges to deal with. I'm just simply saying it doesn't mean that today's world isn't any less challenging for us, just because we have different challenges, right? So, I think I'll kind of wrap this up and really, just make the point. This idea of life happening for us, not to us, it gives you a certain power to navigate the darkness without the darkness consuming you, right? You can understand that it is a part of a bigger picture and it means something different than what we're experiencing on the day to day with it. And I think if you can wrap your head around that the right way and really kind of meditate on it and learn to appreciate your own darkness, the negative things that have happened in life, the negative things that you've done in life, this is where forgiveness comes in, right? When we can appreciate these things, we can forgive the circumstance, the people in the circumstance, ourselves, and anything else, because darkness doesn't have to be dark. It can just be something to navigate. And at the same time, lightness doesn't have to be light. It doesn't have to be something to strive for. It can just be something else we navigate. And when we can appreciate what's in the middle, which is the reality of who we are, where we are, and what we do, you end up in a different place. And you realize that this life thing is pretty freaking cool, right? It's not always what we want it to be, but that's part of what makes it pretty freaking cool, right? So today, just as a sort of call to action on this, if you've watched 22 minutes of me rambling about this idea, I think it'd be really helpful for you to sit down and think about some of the worst things that have happened in your life and just look at the power that it's given you. Maybe you had some really tragic things happen and you haven't yet realized that actually gave you the power to be who you are today. Even if you don't consider yourself to be perfectly balanced based on whatever freaking scale, that's all competition stuff. That's all trying to fit into a mold. No, look at what it gave you. Look at what it allowed you to become, and look at how it served you and how it happened for you and not to you. And you'll see that sometimes these challenges are the best things that we have in life, and they're the biggest gifts that we get. And at the end of it, God's looking at it, smiling, going, I told you, I had you the whole time. And that's a comforting thing. So I hope you get to experience that as well. I'll see you guys in the next one. We'll talk to you soon.